By the end of today's English lesson, your English is going to be a little bit better and you are going to know more about the American government. This English lesson is going to be great if you plan on taking the IELTS or TOEFL exam. If you want to understand a little bit more about how the United States works, but the biggest thing we are going to discuss is what is a vice president? Why do we have one? Who are the two men running for vice president? And we will look at some news clips and learn some English from those. I will slow them down a little bit for you, and there will be subtitles on the screen. This lesson is designed to help you speak, read, listen, and write better in English. Also, if you ever want to become a US citizen, some of this information will be helpful because there is a test that you need to take that proves you know something about the American government. In November, the American citizens will be going to the polls and vote for president. You probably know Donald Trump and you probably know Kamala Harris, but do you know the two men that they are running with? Well, let's talk about them and let's talk about what their main job is going to be. They have a few jobs. One is being president of the Senate. We will talk about that in another English lesson, but their main job is to be ready in case anything bad happens to the president. Our current vice president is in the picture. Her name is Kamala Harris. If you know Joe Biden, you know he is pretty old. Hopefully nothing will happen to him. But if something bad happens to him between now and in January of 2025, Kamala Harris will become our president. I am recording this in August of 2024, and so far we have had 46 presidents. Unfortunately, 9 vice presidents have had to take over for the president. 8 times because the president died in office, and 1 time because the president quit. You may know back in the 1960s, we had a president. His name was John F. Kennedy. He was assassinated. In other words, somebody killed him. And so the vice president took over. He became the president, and his name was Lyndon B. Johnson. Also, in 1974, we had a president, Richard Nixon. He got caught doing some bad things, and he said, I need to resign. I am no longer going to be president. So his vice president, Gerald Ford, then became our new president.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Let's talk about the ticket. So 2 people want to become president. One is a Republican. His name is Donald Trump. And he picked a guy named J.D. Vance to be his vice president. Kamala Harris is running for the Democrats, and she picked a guy named Tim Walz to become her vice president. They run on something called a ticket. And there is a picture of the 2 of them. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are running on the Democratic ticket, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are running on the Republican ticket. When Americans go to the polls in November, once they vote for Donald Trump, they automatically vote for J.D. Vance. If they vote for Kamala Harris, they automatically vote for Tim Walz. Because Donald Trump picked his vice presidential running mate first, let's talk about J.D. Vance first. I have a mini biography for you, a little bit about his life. His full name is James David Vance. He was born on August 2nd, 1984. That makes him 39 years old. He's from the state of Ohio. Let's talk a little bit about the state of Ohio. You can see it right there in the picture. It's not that far from the big city of Chicago, not too far from New York City. It's on the eastern part of the country. Let's read this together. Ohio is a state in the Midwest region of the United States. It has a mix of cities, farms, and factories. The capital city is Columbus. Ohio is known for its sports teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers in basketball. You may have heard of a basketball player named LeBron James. Well, he is from Ohio and he played for the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are also known for the Ohio State Buckeyes in college football. It also has important rivers like the Ohio River, which helps with trade and transportation. J.D. Vance did not grow up in a big city like Columbus or Cleveland or Cincinnati. He grew up in the country. He grew up in a rural part of the state. We will talk about that a little later. A pretty poor part of the state where not a lot of other people live. His job currently is a U.S. Senator. J.D. Vance is a politician and author. He wrote a famous book called Hillbilly Elegy about growing up in a poor family in Ohio. He graduated from Yale Law School. He became a U.S. Senator in 2022 and is known for his conservative views. Conservative is another way to say Republican. I do have an entire video on the difference between Republicans and Democrats. I will leave a link to that at the end of this video. Now he is running to be Vice President of the United States with Donald Trump. So there is a picture of the cover of his book and a poster for the movie. Yes, he has both a book and a movie about his life. We will talk more about that later. He went to Yale Law School, one of the best law schools in the country. Yale Law School is located in Connecticut. Some people have trouble saying that state, Connecticut. And before we start talking about Tim Walz, can I ask for a huge favor? Please hit that like button. It really helps other people find the channel. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss another English lesson. Also, if you would like to support the channel and become a member, I have over 100 bonus English lessons for members only. There is a link in the description to tell you more. There is a picture of Tim Walz, who is running with Kamala Harris. Let's learn a little bit more about him. His full name is Timothy James Walz. He was born on April 6th, 1964, which makes him 60 years old. He and Kamala Harris are about the same age. She is 59 years old, like right now, but in a couple months, she too will be 60 years old. He is from the state of Minnesota, and his current job is that he is the governor of Minnesota. You probably know we have 50 states and we have 50 governors. Each state has a governor. It's like the president of that state. They are the leader of that state. He is the leader of the state of Minnesota.
What would you call that an accent specifically?
Oh, Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You betcha.
It's so fun, yeah?
It was hard.
He just started doing
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Let's learn a little bit about his background. Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota. Before becoming governor, he was a teacher and served in the U.S. Army. He was also a U.S. congressman for 12 years. So J.D. Vance is a senator. Tim Walz was a congressman. I definitely need to do an English lesson about Congress. If I talked about that here, this lesson would be like an hour long. Walz is known for his focus on education and healthcare. He is running to be Vice President of the United States with Kamala Harris. Let's take a look at where Minnesota is located. It's in the middle of the country and it's really close to Canada. Here's a paragraph to help you with your English reading. Minnesota is a state in the northern part of the United States near Canada. It is called the land of the 10,000 lakes because it has many lakes, which are popular for fishing and boating. The capital city is St. Paul, and the largest city is Minneapolis. Minneapolis and St. Paul are two cities really close to each other. You might hear them sometimes called the Twin Cities. Minnesota is known for its cold winters and beautiful natural parks. It is also home to the Mall of America, one of the biggest shopping malls in the country. Now that you have a little background about both men, I would like to play a short news clip for you. This first one is about JD Vance. It's pretty advanced, so I've slowed it down for you. There are subtitles on the screen, and after the clip plays, we will talk about some of the hardest words.
Who is JD Vance? The 39-year-old from Ohio rose to prominence in 2016 with the release of his memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. A Netflix adaptation of the best-selling book would follow in 2020. Now, it tells the story of Senator Vance's impoverished childhood in the Appalachian Mountains of southern Ohio, where he was predominantly raised by his grandparents as his mother struggled with opioid addiction. He eventually joined the Marine Corps, won a scholarship to Yale Law School, and became a venture capitalist in San Francisco.
Okay, you heard them say rose to prominence. What does that mean? For each of these words and terms, I will have a definition and an example sentence for you. Rose to prominence means became well known or important. After his book was published, remember it's called Hillbilly Elegy, he quickly rose to prominence in the writing community. He became famous because of that book. And that book is a memoir. Memoir, it's French. It's a book or story where somebody writes about their own life experiences. Here's an example sentence. She wrote a memoir about her childhood and how she became a famous artist. Now, you might hear this term, autobiography. Autobiography. It's another type of book that somebody writes about their life, but an autobiography covers like their entire life. A memoir usually just talks about one small part of a person's life. Here's a big word that you might see on the IELTS or TOEFL exam, adaptation. Adaptation. When you see the word adapt, that has something to do with change. Adaptation is a noun and it means a change made to something so it can fit a new use or situation. So JD Vance's book was adapted into a movie. It was changed a little bit. If you read a book, it might take 10 or 15 hours. And it only takes about 2 hours to watch a movie. So often books have to be adapted if they are going to be made into a movie. Here is a sentence using adaptation. The movie is an adaptation of a popular book. Impoverished, not a fun word to talk about. In the picture, you can see a person holding open their wallet, and that wallet is empty. It has no money. Impoverished means very poor, having little money or resources. The impoverished family struggled to buy food and pay for their home. JD Vance grew up in an impoverished situation. They said he grew up near the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains are a mountain chain on the eastern side of the United States. Let's get an official definition. A large mountain range in the eastern United States. Many people enjoy hiking in the Appalachian Mountains because of the beautiful views. Opioid addiction. Opioid addiction. What is an opioid addiction? It's a strong and harmful need to keep using drugs called opioids. One of the most famous opioid in English is something called heroin. Horrible, horrible stuff, I am told. And JD Vance's mom was addicted to opioids. Opioid addiction has become a serious problem in many small towns. JD Vance became a venture capitalist. Anytime you hear of somebody being a venture capitalist, there's a good chance they have a lot of money. A venture capitalist is a person who invests money in new businesses to help them grow. The venture capitalist decided to invest in a new technology company. We need to talk about hillbilly and elegy since that is the title of JD Vance's book. Hillbilly. It's a term mostly negative. Usually a bad term. You do not want to be called a hillbilly, but it's used to describe people from rural, mountainous areas. So areas away from the city in the mountains. Not a lot of people in rural areas. Guess what? Tim Walz comes from a rural area. We will talk more about rural in a minute. Often seen as uneducated. So hillbillies aren't usually very smart. Here's a sentence. Hillbillies often live in rural areas. And elegy. What is an elegy? It's a poem or a song that expresses sadness, usually for someone who has died. The singer performed an elegy in memory of his friend who passed away. Well, now that you know a little bit more about JD Vance, let's talk about Tim Walz and let's watch this short news clip about him.
Just a few days ago, most Americans never heard of him. Senior White House correspondent Selena Wang has more on this former high school teacher, football coach, now competing to be America's next vice president.
Good morning, George. Governor Walz's rise to the Democratic ticket has been meteoric. In a matter of days, he went from being a relatively unknown politician to leading the party's attacks on Trump and JD Vance. And now he is racing to introduce himself to the American people. Born and raised in rural Nebraska, Governor Tim Walz's journey to the Democratic ticket, anything but conventional.
I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket.
Walz, a former high school social studies teacher, now a vice presidential candidate at 60 years old. He joined the Army National Guard at 17 to help pay for college, serving 24 years as an enlisted soldier while teaching in Minnesota.
Tim Walz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having.
They talked about a meteoric rise of Tim Walz. Meteoric. In the picture, I have a meteor. You might see meteors in the night sky zipping by. They're very fast and they go up, or it looks like they're going up in the sky. A meteoric rise or something that is meteoric happens very suddenly and very quickly, especially something that has become successful fast. So they're saying that Tim Walz became famous very quickly. Here is a sentence using meteoric. Her rise to fame was meteoric after she released her first hit song. We've talked about this so much, it's probably review now. Rural. Rural. Think of it as the opposite of a city. The countryside rather than the city. She grew up in a rural area where most people work on farms. Now, Tim Walz is from Minnesota. We have talked about Minnesota, but he was born in a state called Nebraska. And if you look at that picture, it is smack dab in the middle of the country. Nebraska is a state in the central part of the United States, known for its large farmlands, lots of farms in Nebraska. It's very rural in Nebraska. Nebraska is famous for its cornfields and wide open spaces. Let's take a look at a picture of a cornfield. Lots and lots of corn in that field. So this one might be difficult. Anything but conventional. If something is conventional, it's pretty normal. If it's anything but conventional, it means it's very different from what is usual or normal. Unique is another way to say anything but conventional. His style of cooking is anything but conventional. He likes to mix in crazy ingredients. Tim Walz served in the Army National Guard. What is that? It's a little bit different from the Army. If someone is in the Army, they are in there full time. Like that is their main job. If you're in the Army National Guard, maybe you're a teacher and then you serve in the Army on the weekends. You usually have to do a couple weeks throughout the year, so it's not full time. Army National Guard, a military force in the United States that serves both the country and the individual states, often helping during emergencies like natural disasters. And you might hear the English phrasal verb call up when we talk about the Army National Guard. I live in a cold part of the country. Let's say we had a really bad snowstorm where I live, like really bad. The governor of my state could call up the Army National Guard. It's an emergency. We need extra people to help. All of those people who are in the National Guard, they might be teachers, they might be doctors, they might be lawyers, but when there is an emergency, they have to stop their regular job and help out with the Army National Guard. The Army National Guard was called up to help after the hurricane hit the coast. You also heard enlisted. What does that mean? Signed up to serve in the military. After high school, he enlisted in the Army to serve his country. Mentor. Take a look at that picture. You have an older person and two younger people in that picture. The older person is probably their mentor. What is a mentor? It is a person who guides and helps someone with less experience. I'm a teacher in a public school. A lot of times when a teacher is teaching in their first year, they will be signed a mentor. A teacher who has been teaching a while and can show them the ropes. Show them the ropes is an idiom meaning like show them how things work. Here's a sentence using mentor. She found a mentor at work who taught her how to be a better manager. If you are looking for more English, there is an English lesson I did about what is the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Just yesterday, a major news story happened which just may decide our next president. A guy who we will talk about, his name is RFK Jr., dropped out of the race and endorsed President Trump, or should I say former President Trump. Let's look at a sentence explaining what happened. Last night, RFK Jr. dropped out of the presidential race and endorsed former President Donald Trump. Why is this important? Who is this guy? Why is he important? In this English lesson, you will learn about American politics, American history, advanced vocabulary, English idioms, and those pesky English phrasal verbs. If that sounds interesting to you, please hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet, and let's get into this lesson. So R.F. Kennedy Jr. or Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. was running for president. He no longer is. And he endorsed President Trump. If you have seen some of my other English videos, you know what endorsed means. If not, let me tell you. That means that that person now says, hey, I am voting for Donald Trump and maybe you should too. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. is an American lawyer and an environmental activist. Environmental activist. What is that? In that picture, you can see the earth. So the environment is anything that has to do with keeping the earth healthy. And an activist is someone who tries to make that happen. So let's look at the official definition. An environmental activist is a person who works to protect the environment and fights against pollution and other problems that harm nature. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is also known for not liking vaccines, which has made him a controversial figure. Let's just talk about vaccines first. It's usually a shot that you get that prevents you from getting sick in the future. Oh, YouTube is going to love this English lesson. It will be a miracle if you see this, because I'm talking about vaccines, and later I will be talking about the Kennedy assassination, 2 of them actually. In the United States, a lot of doctors recommend to parents to have their children vaccinated at an early age. This is done so children won't get sick in the future and they won't make others sick. RFK Jr. doesn't believe in that. I've mentioned that he is a controversial figure. Let's talk about what controversial means. The word controversial describes something that people have strong opinions about, either liking it a lot or not really liking it. Some people love RFK Jr., some people don't. RFK Jr. is a controversial figure because some people agree with his ideas, while many others strongly disagree. You might also hear the term polarizing figure. It's the same thing. Some people love him, some people hate him. There aren't too many people in between saying, I don't really care. With RFK Jr. endorsing former President Trump, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, which is an idiom to say everything's perfect. RFK Jr. comes with some baggage. What does that idiom mean? The phrase comes with some baggage means that a person has a past that could cause problems or make people think badly about them. RFK, supporting Trump, comes with some baggage because both have done or said things in the past that some people do not like. Let's face it, former President Trump is also a controversial figure. He is a polarizing figure. But let's talk about what comes with some baggage means outside of politics. Let's pretend you know a person in their 20s. Maybe they are 23 years old. They do not have children. They have never been married. But they start dating a person who does have children. And they're also in their early 20s. Well, that person could come with some baggage. Those kids could be the baggage. Did I mention this in the picture? Baggage. It's like luggage. It's like extra things you have to carry around. But if it's an idiom, well, it means something different. Those kids would be the baggage, or they could be the baggage. A lot of people in their early 20s don't want to have to think about kids yet. So if they started dating a person who already had children, that might be some baggage that they don't want to have to deal with at such an early age. To fully understand who RFK Jr. is, we need to talk about his family, the Kennedys. They are they are definitely the most famous political family in the United States. RFK Jr. is the son of Robert Kennedy, or you might hear him called RFK. A lot of these guys are known by their initials. The first letter of their name. Robert Francis Kennedy is known as RFK. And he is the nephew of President John F. Kennedy, or JFK. Robert F. Kennedy and John F. Kennedy were brothers. In the picture, you can see 3 people. We haven't talked about one of them. The shortest one on the left is RFK, Robert F. Kennedy. The one in the middle is Teddy Kennedy, another brother. He was a senator from the state of Massachusetts. And the one all the way to the right is JFK, or John F. Kennedy. And to be honest, two of the brothers come with a lot of baggage. We won't get into that. But the one that doesn't have a lot of baggage, maybe no baggage, is RFK, Robert Francis Kennedy, sometimes known just as Bobby. Bobby is a nickname for Robert, and if you saw President Trump's speech, he called RFK Jr. Bobby quite a bit.
I will tell you, we are both in this to do what's right for the country. That's one thing I can tell you. He lost his father and uncle in service to our country, and Bobby himself was subject to repeated threats to his safety.
Okay, this can get super confusing. There's also an RFK the third. And if you look at that picture, he's a little younger. He is RFK Jr.'s son. Try to follow this. RFK Jr.'s dad was RFK. RFK Jr. has a son also named RFK. So he is called the third. But who is JFK? Who is John Fitzgerald Kennedy? JFK was the 35th president of the United States, serving from 1961 until he was assassinated in 1963. He is well known for his speeches and leadership during the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Do you know the Cold War? That was a period of time after World War II when the United States and Russia, known as the Soviet Union at the time, there were a few other countries with the Soviet Union, Ukraine, Belarus, a long history there, Kazakhstan. Well, the US and the Soviet Union didn't get along too well. And the Cuban Missile Crisis happened in October of 1961, I believe, or 62. And that was a time when the Soviet Union and the United States almost went to war, nuclear war. The Soviet Union was trying to put nuclear missiles on the island of Cuba, which is just 90 miles away from the United States. Now, the United States had nuclear weapons in Turkey, and they were pointed at the Soviet Union, but the United States did not like these nuclear weapons so close to their country. They told the Soviet Union to move them. And thankfully, the Soviet leader at the time, his name was Nikita Khrushchev, he did that. And we did not have World War III or nuclear war, but it was close. And President Kennedy was our president at the time. JFK was the older brother of RFK and the uncle of RFK Jr. So who is RFK? And if you look, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., sometimes we call the father senior just so we know the difference between senior and junior. Robert F. Kennedy was U.S. Attorney General, which is like the highest lawyer, a very important position in the United States. He was also a senator, and he played an important role in civil rights and fighting organized crime in the 1960s. When you hear civil rights, think 1960s, you might think about that guy in the picture. His name is Martin Luther King Jr., also known by his initials sometimes, MLK. And it was a period of time in the United States where if your skin was black or not white, if you were anything but white, you did not have the same rights as people who were white. And there was a big fight in the 1960s to try to get some laws passed so things would be more equal. I don't want to talk too much about organized crime, but we sometimes call it the mob. And if you've ever seen movies like Godfather or Goodfellas, that is what organized crime is. RFK Sr. was a close advisor to his brother. So he gave a lot of advice to John F. Kennedy, the president. He helped him out a lot. Unfortunately, while he was running for president in 1968, he was also assassinated. Let's go back to 2024 and talk about RFK Jr. He was what was called a third-party candidate. In the United States, if you've been watching my videos, you know we have two major political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. And if you are running for president and you're not a Republican or a Democrat, you are called a third-party candidate. To be honest, third-party candidates have no chance of winning. There is just too much money on the Republican side and on the Democratic side. But let's get the official definition of what a third-party candidate is. A third-party candidate is someone who runs for president but is not from one of the two main political parties, Democrats and Republicans. Let's look at an example sentence. In the 2024 election, some voters supported a third-party candidate instead of choosing between the main parties. And that third-party candidate was RFK Jr. Some people think that now that RFK is not running and he has endorsed former President Trump, the people who were going to vote for RFK Jr. will now vote for President Trump. And that might give him the presidency. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there are some people who call themselves never Trumpers. Never Trump, which is exactly what it sounds like. A person, usually a Republican, who is strongly against Donald Trump and refuses to support him. Some of those never Trumpers were going to vote for RFK Jr. Now that he is not running, some never Trumpers will probably just not vote. I'm not sure if they will actually vote for President Trump. Here's a sentence using never Trumpers. Even though they are Republicans, some people call themselves never Trumpers because they don't agree with Trump's views. You also might hear this, an independent. Let's talk about what an independent voter is. If someone isn't a Republican or a Democrat, they might be an independent. So let's look at a recent poll here about people voting for president. If you look at that bar in blue, those are people who support Vice President Harris. Democrats are usually a blue color. We have blue states, we have red states. Red would be people who are supporting President Trump. And if you look at those numbers, they do not add up to 100%. Look at that first one for all adults. According to the poll, 50% of adults will be voting for Vice President Harris. 45% will be voting for President Trump. Now, those extra 5%, they might be voting for RFK Jr., or they would have voted for him until he dropped out of the race, or they might be something we call undecided. They don't know who they are voting for yet. We talked about a lot of things in this English lesson. If you are still looking for more English, right down there, 2 hours, over 2 hours of English lessons about politics. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. There is a pretty big event happening here in the United States, and I thought it would be a good chance for me to teach you some terms, some idioms, some English phrasal verbs you might hear if you watch a news story about this big event. And the big event in the United States this week is called the DNC. Let's talk all about what the DNC is It's a pretty big deal. The 2024 DNC will be held in Chicago from August 19th to the 22nd. But what is the DNC? It is the Democratic National Convention. And as we go through this lesson, you will know what all three of those words mean. Democratic, that basically means not Republican. If you think Donald Trump, think Republican. If you think President Biden or Vice President Harris, then that is the Democratic Party. And this week, they're holding a convention. What is a convention? It is a large meeting or event where decisions are made. And that middle part, national, it just means everyone from the United States. And we'll talk about exactly who will be attending this convention. Let's get an official definition for the DNC. The DNC is a big meeting where members of the Democratic Party choose their candidate for president of the United States. But I just want to be clear, when we talk about conventions, it doesn't just have to be a political convention like this one. You could have a doctor's convention or a teacher's convention. I have been to many teachers' conventions, and to be honest, they aren't exactly fun. They can be a little boring. I do need to take a break from this lesson just for a second to thank you for 45,000 subscribers. Thank you to anyone who has subscribed, anyone who has shared these lessons with other people who are learning English. Even if you have just liked this video, thank you. Or maybe you left a comment. All of that really helps the channel grow. So thank you so much. You may have heard of Chicago. Well, this year's convention takes place in Chicago, and that is our third biggest city. One of our most famous politicians is from Chicago. Who do you think that might be? We will be talking about him in just a minute. What happens at the Democratic National Convention? Delegates from all over the US come together to vote on the candidate. Well, this year, there is no secret on who the candidate will be. It will be Kamala Harris, our current vice president. Maybe we should talk about delegates, just in case it isn't clear. That is a person chosen to represent others at a convention. So the more people who live in a state, the more delegates that state gets. California, our biggest state, gets like 400 delegates. My little state of Maine gets like 30 delegates. And all of the delegates this year will meet in Chicago and vote on who they think should be the candidate for the Democratic Party. I hope this is clear so far because it can be pretty confusing. Delegates are there to vote for the candidate who won their state's primary election in the spring. Again, we have two political parties, Republicans and Democrats. And in the spring, each state held a primary election. So if you were a Democrat, you could go and vote on who you thought should be the candidate for that party. The Republicans did the same thing. And the Republicans already held their national convention. It was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, about a month ago. And I will be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in about a month, and I will record some English lessons there. And those delegates who are chosen, for example, the 30 from my state, they can't vote for whoever they want. They have to vote for whoever won in my state's primary. Let's just leave it there because technically most of the states voted for Joe Biden in the primaries, but Kamala Harris is going to be that party's candidate. Not everybody agrees with that, especially Republicans, but let's keep it simple. Kamala Harris will be the Democratic candidate for the general election. That is going to happen in November when President Trump will face off against Kamala Harris. And I've been using that verb nominate, and now we have a noun nominee, which is a person. A nominee is the person chosen for the party to run for president. People nominate a person. That person is the nominee. So the nominee for the Republican Party is Donald Trump, and the nominee for the Democratic Party is Kamala Harris. And there will be some very famous people speaking at the DNC. In fact, today, I'm releasing this on August 19th. Those people will be speaking at the Democratic National Convention. Who are they? President Joe Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden will speak at the convention. On the second night of the convention, this guy, probably the most famous Democrat, he is actually from the city of Chicago. On August 20th, former President Obama plus second gentleman Doug Emhoff will speak. Let's talk about that guy now. Second gentleman, which means he is the husband of the vice president. We talked about First Lady Jill Biden. She is the wife of the president. If Kamala Harris gets elected to the presidency in November, Doug Emhoff will become the first gentleman, and he will be our first ever first gentleman. We've never had a woman become president. In the entire history of this country, all we have ever had are first ladies, because all of our presidents so far have been men. Maybe you have heard of this guy. He is another former president. He is also a Democrat, Bill Clinton. Former President Bill Clinton will speak on August 21st. I would like to teach you this term, bigwigs. Bigwigs. What does that mean? Well, let's look at a sentence using bigwigs. All of the bigwigs will be in Chicago this week for the convention. So maybe you have thought that bigwig might mean famous people, important people. If that's your thought, you are correct. Maybe at your job, a bunch of bigwigs come and visit. Those would be important people in the company. You might get nervous if the bigwigs are in the building. Bigwig is another way to say important people. All right. If you thought it was confusing before, it might just get a little confusing. I'm going to try to explain this as best I can because it is difficult for native English speakers. But we have something in this country called Roe v. Wade. It is a very famous court case. It was decided in the 1970s, and it said that women in this country had a right to have an abortion. Just in case you don't know what an abortion is in English, let me try to say it this way. If a woman gets pregnant and she doesn't want to have the baby, she can get what we call an abortion. And it's an operation that basically gets rid of the baby or the fetus. That's what we call the little thing before it becomes a baby. Okay, we have something called the Supreme Court in this country. It's like the most powerful court. There isn't a court bigger, and they uphold the laws. They make sure the laws are being followed. Back in June of 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, ending the right to abortion. Now, that affected the entire nation, but it did not affect the states. So it did not make abortion illegal. It just gave that decision back to the states. We have some states that are more Republican, and in those states, it might be harder to get an abortion now. In blue states or more Democratic states, there probably hasn't been much of a change. Women can probably still get an abortion if they want to pretty easily. If they live in a red state, they may have to drive to a blue state. It might be much more difficult to get an abortion. What I would like to do now is watch a short news clip and then talk about all of the difficult things they talk about in that news clip. And it's going to be about protesters. There will be many protesters outside of the convention center. That's the building where this convention is taking place, the convention center. There are going to be two major protests. In other words, people are upset about something and they are going to be talking about it. They are going to be marching together. And those two things are abortion and what is going on in Palestine or Gaza.
National convention here. Many people have made their way to the city or will be making their way to the city this week to make their voices heard.
All right, let's go. They used some terms that could be a little tricky. Terms with like made or make or get. They're always difficult for English learners. Made their way. What does that mean? It means to move or go towards a place. Protesters made their way to Union Park to join the rally supporting Palestinian freedom. So in other words, it means to go to a place. For example, I made my way to school this morning. Luckily, I didn't. I have another week off before I need to go back into the classroom. But you could say, hey, I need to make my way over to the grocery store later because I ran out of tissues or paper towels or salt or sugar. Make their voices heard. What does that mean? To express opinions or concerns loudly and clearly so that others notice. And in the picture, you can see it looks like people are protesting. They want to make their voice heard. Here is a sentence using that term. Activists. It's another way to say people who are protesting. Activists gathered to make their voices heard on keeping abortion rights legal during the DNC.
Many people have made their way to the city or will be making their way to the city this week to make their voices heard.
A peaceful rally got underway yesterday, and now the question is, will rallies remain peaceful over the next couple of days? Our Darius Johnson is live in Union Park right now with more on the first rally and others happening today. Good morning, Darius.
Good morning, Dana and Audrina. Yeah, I think everyone in the city is honestly breathing a sigh of relief this morning after seeing that peaceful protests get underway yesterday as hundreds made their way here to the city of Chicago.
They also mentioned Union Park. A lot of big cities in the United States have green places in the middle of them. There might be a lot of really big buildings, but somewhere in the city is a place where there are a lot of trees, a lot of grass. Chicago has Union Park, and they have a bigger park called Lincoln Park, which is like Central Park in New York City. And there's also a smaller park called Washington Park, which I actually filmed an English lesson at. Here is the official definition for Union Park. A public park in Chicago, often used for large gatherings and events. And a public park means people can go to it. It's the opposite of a private park. If a park is private, you need like special permission to get in. The protest at Union Park attracted hundreds of people demanding reproductive rights. We will talk more about reproductive rights, but it has to do with women and their right to have an abortion if they want.
Yeah, I think everyone in the city is honestly breathing a sigh of relief this morning after seeing that peaceful protests get underway yesterday as hundreds made their way here to the city of Chicago. I can tell you everything remained peaceful and there were a lot of police out as well. Go ahead and take a look and a listen at how things went. It started at Wacker in Michigan as a reproductive rights rally, but turned into a Free Palestine rally as protesters gathered and made their way down Michigan Avenue before ending at Grant Park.
Rally. What is that? It's a large public meeting, especially for a political cause or protest. Here is a sentence. The reproductive rights rally drew a big crowd of supporters at the DNC. Rally and protest. Are they the same? They could be. A rally is when a lot of people get together, usually for politics. A lot of times, politicians will hold rallies to increase support, to make their voters energized, to make them want to vote. President Trump, Vice President Harris do this almost every weekend. They will hold a rally. A protest is a type of rally where people are upset about something and they want to see a change. Breathing a sigh of relief. If you look at that picture, it's like somebody is going, and that is what we call a sigh. But what is breathing a sigh of relief? It means feeling less worried or stressed after something improves or turns out well. So the police and the people of Chicago were breathing a sigh of relief when it turned out those protests weren't violent. They were peaceful. Let's look at this sentence. People in Chicago were breathing a sigh of relief when the protests were kept peaceful. Get underway. I don't know about you, but get might be the hardest word in English. It's so small, but we use it in so many different ways. Put is another small word that's really hard. Get underway. It means to start or to begin something. The DNC gets underway tonight in Chicago. All right, let's look at this picture. This is from that news clip. You can see a woman in a black t-shirt. I can't quite read her t-shirt, but I think it might say keep abortion free and legal, maybe. And she also has a bullhorn, which makes her voice louder. There's also some people holding Palestinian flags. So it looks like this protest is combining two different groups. People who are wanting to see abortion rights stay in the nation, and also people who don't like what is going on in Gaza right now. Also, there is a woman in a green shirt who is wearing a mask outside. I'm not sure. Do masks really help when you're outside? Do you really need a mask when you're outside? Please let me know in the comments. Is this woman being protected with a mask outside?
Yeah, I think everyone in the city is honestly breathing a sigh of relief this morning after seeing that peaceful protests get underway yesterday as hundreds made their way here to the city of Chicago. I can tell you everything remained peaceful and there were a lot of police out as well. Go ahead and take a look and a listen at how things went. It started at Wacker in Michigan as a reproductive rights rally, but turned into a Free Palestine rally as protesters gathered and made their way down Michigan Avenue before ending at Grant Park. Chicago police were out in full force, lining the street.
I've mentioned this a couple times. Productive rights rally. Let's get an official definition. People getting together, raising awareness for the need to protect women's rights to legal abortions. Before Roe v. Wade in the 1970s, women were getting illegal abortions, and sometimes women died during those operations. A lot of people would like to see women being able to have legal abortions so there are fewer deaths. Here is a sentence using productive rights rally. The Productive Rights Rally was one of the largest events during the protests at the DNC. Out in full force, they also mention. What does that mean? Lots of people come out or are present. The police were out in full force, just in case things turned violent or got out of hand. Got out of hand is another way to say out of control. You could also say the protesters were out in full force today, which is another way to say a lot of people attended the protest. They talked about how police were lining the streets. What does that mean? Standing or forming a line along a place. Police were lining the streets outside the DNC, making sure everything stayed peaceful. In this picture, looks like we have a haunted house and jack-o'-lanterns are lining the walkway.
Chicago police were out in full force, lining the streets.
But from what I saw tonight, I think it's going to be a very exciting time for the city of Chicago. It's going to be work involved, and we always have to be concerned. However, if things go like they did tonight, we should be fine.
There are more protests planned for today on day one of the convention. The coalition to march on the DNC, comprised of 270 organizations. Their mission is to fight for the rights and liberation of the oppressed.
Oh, goodness. The news can be pretty advanced sometimes, right? Coalition. What does that mean? A group of people, organizations, working together for the same reason. The protest was organized by a coalition of groups supporting both reproductive rights and Palestinian liberation. Oh my goodness, that is a big term, right? Palestinian liberation. Liberation. Think freedom. We'll talk more about that in a minute. They also use the word comprised. What does that mean? Made up of or including specific parts or members. Here's a sentence. The protest was comprised of people from various backgrounds, from different backgrounds, some rich, some poor, some black, some white, some Hispanic, some Asian, some men, some women, all united for a common cause, liberation. We talked about that just a minute ago. Look at that picture. It looks like that person is celebrating. It looks like they are very free. So liberation, the official definition, the act of gaining freedom or rights, especially from oppression. Oh goodness. We'll talk about oppression in just a minute. The protesters chanted for the liberation of oppressed people in Palestine. So if people are oppressed, they don't have their freedom. Unfortunately, at one time in this country, we had slavery. Slaves were oppressed. They did not have their freedom. Oppressed. Let's get the official definition. Treated unfairly or cruelly, especially by those in power. The speakers were hoping the oppressed people would be seen by those in power. Ooh, I don't know about you, but I'm tired after all that teaching. Maybe you are tired from all of that learning. It was a difficult one. Maybe you want to watch this one again. But if that wasn't too hard and you're still ready for more learning, right down there are more English lessons I did about politics. Thanks so much for joining. See you next time. Watching the news in English is a great way to improve your English, but let's face it, they use some pretty advanced words. They will often use very difficult English phrasal verbs. Who knows? They might throw in an idiom or two. So in today's English lesson, what I would like to do is watch a news clip about Elon Musk interviewing former President Trump. I will explain some of the difficult vocabulary they use, some of those English phrasal verbs, so the next time you have a conversation in English, or maybe if you are studying for the IELTS or TOEFL exams, you will feel more comfortable. Let's watch a short clip from ABC News. I have put the subtitles on the screen and I've slowed it down just a little bit.
It's now called X, for a long conversation with Elon Musk that was hampered by technical issues. Rachel Scott is tracking the race. Good morning, Rachel.
Hey, George, good morning to you. This all got off to a very rocky start. That conversation was delayed by more than 40 minutes because of those tech issues. Elon Musk said he wanted to have this conversation so that the former president could appeal to independent voters. Overnight, Donald Trump's bot returned to the platform that once banished him for posting false claims about the election. The company saying at the time the account was permanently suspended due to the risk of further incitement of violence.
One of the first difficult phrases I heard them use was hampered by technical issues. Whoa, that can be very tough. I have a proper definition for you, and then I will use that term in a sentence. Hampered by technical issues. It means delayed or made difficult by problems with technology.
Conversation with Elon Musk that was hampered by technical issues.
The interview with Donald Trump was hampered by technical issues. It started 40 minutes late. So hampered means there's some kind of problem. But you can also have a hamper in your house. What is that? A hamper can be a place to keep dirty clothes until you're ready to wash them. Let's talk about this next word, track. It can be a noun, it can be a verb. We are going to talk about a couple different ways it is used. In the interview, they say tracking the race. What does that mean? Following or keeping an eye on the progress of an election or a competition. You can imagine that former President Trump has a team of people tracking his campaign. They are checking to make sure that they are doing well against Vice President Harris. Elon Musk asked Donald Trump how he was tracking the race for the presidency. But sometimes when I order something through the mail, I will be able to track that package. I can keep an eye on it. Maybe I have an app on my phone that tells me where my package is. You probably have something like this in your country. You can also run on a track. Maybe you want to get a little exercise, so you go down to the local track and run around it. Hopefully, you are not hampered by a bad leg. If you are hampered by that, it would make your run a little more difficult. If it wouldn't be too much trouble, could you give this lesson a like? Hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe so you never miss another English lesson. And the interview got off to a rocky start. Got off, that is an English phrasal verb meaning to start. And a rocky start is one that has problems. Here is the official definition. Began with some problems or some difficulties. Now, I hope this didn't happen to you today, but if you had a bad morning, you can say your day started with a rocky start. Hopefully by lunchtime, it gets better. The interview got off to a rocky start when the video connection failed. I'm not sure if you tried to listen to that interview on X or Twitter. It's called X now, but if you tried to listen to that interview at the start on X, you weren't able to do it. They had some major technical problems. It got off to a rocky start.
Good morning to you. This all got off to a very rocky start. That conversation was delayed by more than 40 minutes.
This is a difficult one. Could appeal to independent voters. A lot of people in this country are either a Republican or a Democrat, but there are some people who are neither a Democrat or a Republican. We call those independents. They do not belong to a political party. And if you appeal to someone, that means they like you. Elon Musk is hoping that Donald Trump can appeal to independent voters. He's definitely going to appeal to Republican voters. That's his political party. But he probably won't appeal to Democratic voters. They will probably vote for Vice President Harris. Here is the official definition. Might be liked by voters who are not loyal to any political party. Donald Trump explained how his new campaign could appeal to independent voters.
Elon Musk said he wanted to have this conversation so that the former president could appeal to independent voters.
The next one is botched return. I hope you have never heard botched before. Hopefully, I can teach you that. But a botched return is a failed or poorly handled comeback. Donald Trump was kicked off of Twitter. He was forced to leave, but now he's back. So that's his return. That's his comeback. And if something is botched, it's failed, it's messed up, it didn't work. The interview was designed to welcome President Trump back to Twitter or X, but it was clearly a botched return.
Overnight, Donald Trump's botched return to the platform that once banished him for posting false claims about the election.
It was botched because of those technical issues. We have a TV show here in the United States called Botched, and it's all about people who get plastic surgery. Maybe they want to fix their nose, but the doctor botches it, messes it up. It doesn't look right. Earlier this year, I had a hair transplant where I got more hair here in the front of my head. Luckily, it wasn't botched. Some of the hair has fallen out. It's supposed to fall out, but it will be back soon. Thank you to Cab for the hair transplant. If you would like a transplant yourself, I can get you 10% off. Check the description below. Oh dear. Banished. This is a bad one. Sent away or removed from a place or situation, usually as a punishment. So at one time, and we will talk about why a little later, Donald Trump was banished from Twitter. I can't call Twitter X for some reason. It's still Twitter to me. Here is a sentence using banished. Trump was banished from Twitter for a long time before Elon Musk let him back.
Overnight, Donald Trump's botched return to the platform that once banished him for posting false claims about the election.
In the news clip, they said permanently suspended. I would like to talk about each of those words on their own. Let's start with permanent. Permanent means forever, for all time. And if you look at that picture, that person is getting a tattoo. And guess what? Tattoos are forever. They will stay on your skin until the end of time. Here is a sentence, not about Elon Musk or Donald Trump, using permanently. She moved to Canada and lived there permanently, never returning to the United States. If you get a tattoo, it is permanently on your skin. It's not temporary. Temporary is the opposite of permanent. Temporary only lasts for a short period of time. Donald Trump worried that he had been permanently banned from Twitter. Turned out he was only temporarily banned. Temporarily. Not easy to say.
The company saying at the time the account was permanently suspended due to the risk of further incitement of violence.
Suspended. They talked about that in the news clip. What does that mean? Temporarily, there's that word again, temporarily prevented from taking part in something. And I will talk about that picture in just a second. Suspended is never a good thing. Do you know what a driver's license is? It's a piece of paper or a card that you need to show in order to drive a car. Your driver's license could be suspended. That means you can't drive for a short period of time. And this person in the car, they might have been driving with a suspended license. I'm sure the police officer will make them pay some money. Hopefully, they won't have to do jail time.
He's saying at the time the account was permanently suspended due to the risk of further incitement of violence.
Incitement of violence. What does that mean? Encouraging others to act in a harmful or violent way. If you incite violence, that means you want other people to do violence, to commit crimes. The two discussed the reasons behind Trump's suspension, including the possible incitement of violence. Okay, we have this thing now in English called January 6th. Whenever you hear that, think of a time when people, ordinary citizens, broke into the Capitol building. That is the Capitol building in that picture. Some people say that President Trump incited violence on January 6th. Some people say President Trump wanted people to get violent, and that is why he was kicked off. There is a phrasal verb we can use. That is why he was kicked off of Twitter or suspended from Twitter. I hope this was a helpful lesson for you. If you are looking for more English lessons, I did one about our future vice president. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. If you clicked on this English lesson, I think that you want to improve your English. You also like American politics, and you might be preparing for the IELTS or TOEFL exams. In today's English lesson, we are going to look at a recent news story that talks about how Vice President Harris and former President Trump might have a debate. We will take a look at an interview from CNN, that is a cable news station here in the United States, but I have added subtitles to the screen and I slowed it down just a bit to help you understand the news in English. Yes, we are going to talk about some advanced vocabulary words, some English idioms, and of course, those pesky English phrasal verbs. But the first thing we should talk about is, what is a debate in English? I'm going to have at least 20 terms for you, and each term will have a simple definition, and I will use that term in an example sentence. So, what is a debate in English? It is a formal discussion between people with different opinions. And if you look at the picture, you can see, of course, an American flag in the background, but it looks like there is a donkey and a pig. Now, I'm not sure why there is a pig, to be honest. The donkey represents the Democratic Party. Vice President Harris is from the Democratic Party, and President Trump is from the Republican Party. They are not pigs. They are represented by the animal, an elephant. Let's take a look at a sentence below. There will be a debate between Vice President Harris and former President Trump next month. That's the example sentence. We are not quite sure that is going to happen. I think most American citizens would like to see that. They would like to learn a little bit more about the candidates who are running for president, but it might not happen. And we will talk about why a little later. The next term that would be helpful to know is audience. This one might be a little bit easier, but they are going to talk about it in the interview we are going to watch. Audience, what is it? It's a group of people who watch or listen to something. Last month, President Biden and former President Trump had a debate, but there was no audience. There was somebody in the room, and we will talk about them next. But let's talk about a sentence that has audience in it. The debate will have a large audience watching on TV. So yes, the American public was able to watch the two men have a debate, but There were only a few other people in the room while the debate was happening. This next debate between Harris and Trump might have a live audience, meaning other people will be in the room watching. Who was in the room during the last debate? We need to talk about that person. We will call them a moderator. But let's talk about what the verb moderate means. It means to lead a discussion or a debate. It's like the person in charge of the debate. They are the person who asks the questions. They are also the person that makes sure each debater doesn't take up too much time. A moderator moderates. Moderator, noun, moderates, verb. And every good debater needs their opponent. The opponent is a person who is against someone in a competition or a debate. In the picture, we call that game in English chess. Chess. I suppose you could play chess by yourself, but most people will play with an opponent. That means someone else who is playing and they are trying to beat you. The same thing happens in a debate. If a soccer team is playing a game, they have an opponent. Let's look at a sentence that uses opponent. In the debate, each candidate will try to win against their opponent. And in these presidential debates, let's talk about that word next. In these presidential debates, the American people decide who wins. There is no score being kept. As an American voter, I can watch the debate and say, oh, that person won. I am going to vote for them in November. Other people will watch the same debate and think the other person won, and they will vote for the other person in November. Presidential. This is an adjective. It describes something that a president might do. There is the definition: related to the president or the position of president. Please let me know in the comments, what building is that in the picture? Oh, hey, and while I am asking you to do stuff, could you please like this video? It helps other people find this lesson. And if you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Go ahead and subscribe so you never miss another English lesson. And in the description below, you will see all of these words listed with the definition and the example sentence. Let's use presidential in a sentence. The presidential debate between Harris and Trump will be watched by millions. We are almost ready to watch the interview, but there are a couple more words I would like to teach you. Rebuttal. What is that? It is a reply to a criticism or an argument, showing why it is wrong. In a typical debate, the moderator will ask one of the candidates a question, and then there will be time for the other candidate to give their rebuttal. In other words, to say why that first person is wrong. There is a sentence below. During the debate, Vice President Harris gave a strong rebuttal to Trump's claims. And a claim is just something you believe is true. Oh, big word here. Defamation. Defamation. This is a legal term. It means saying false things about someone to damage their reputation. We have a news network here in the United States called ABC, and right now, former President Trump doesn't really like that news station. There is a sentence at the bottom. Trump accused ABC News of defamation after they made false statements about him. Or at least President Trump believes they are false statements, like lies. Before we watch this news clip, let's talk about CNN. This is a clip from CNN. If you have seen some of my other English lessons about American politics, I've talked about CNN and Fox before. Fox is a news station more for President Trump fans or Republicans. CNN is more for Harris and Biden fans. Those are the Democrats. In the clip, you will see a reporter from CNN interviewing two people. The woman in the yellow dress, her name is Maria, and she is a Democrat. She likes Vice President Harris. The other man is named Alex, and he's more of a Republican. He's more of a fan of President Trump.
With Alex, Trump is changing the rule. I mean, Trump says the Democrats changed the conditions because, of course, they brought a new candidate. He did agree to ABC. Now he's saying totally different race. I want Fox and I want an audience here. Is he going to win that argument?
I think he is. I mean, look, to be fair, it was a completely different candidate. 17 million people voted in primaries for Joe Biden and selected him. And then 2,500 people went online a couple days ago and said, no, we have a new candidate. That agreement...
And she is a vice president, though, so...
Understood. If President Biden wants to keep that first debate, I think that's fine. I think it's completely acceptable and, frankly, deserved for that to be a new conversation.
Okay, your response, Maria?
I think it shows that he's terrified of debating somebody as good as Kamala Harris.
Let's talk about a couple things that were said in that interview. Frankly, the man is going to say frankly a couple times. It's a good thing to use if you want to speak more like a native English speaker. When you start saying something really important, you can say, frankly, like that man did. It's like, to be honest, I often say that before I'm going to tell something I really believe in. My wife, Jamie, might ask me, hey, do you want to get Mexican food tonight? I'm really craving some tacos. I might say, well, to be honest, I'm kind of wanting to stay home. I don't really want to go out. Frankly, I just want to stay home. And it looks like those two men are having a frank discussion. Frank can be a person's name, but it can also mean like honestly, directly. Trump said, frankly, I think my policies are better for the country. There is also a famous line from a very old movie that uses frankly.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Ooh, he said a bad word. Not too bad, just a little bad. Little cuss word, little swear word there. Maria also used the word terrified. Do you know that? I'm pretty sure you could see that on the IELTS or the TOEFL exams. It's another way to say like really, really scared, very scared. Some days you might say, frankly, I am terrified to speak English. Some people are terrified about what will happen after the debate. The last time former President Trump debated anybody, he debated President Biden. Shortly after President Biden did so bad in the debate, he dropped out of the race. I will leave a link at the end of this video for a lesson I did about Biden dropping out of the presidential race. Let's watch another clip.
I think it shows that he wants to do it on Fox. He wants to do it with an audience because those two things are like security blankets for him. And that's what he needs right now. This race has completely discombobulated him and the people around him. They have no idea how to approach running against somebody who is so accomplished, who is whip smart, who has a background as a prosecutor, and Donald Trump is a 34 times convicted felon.
So, fair. Those are different venues. Fox, a very different network from ABC. The audience is something that he thrives on or believes he could thrive on. So what's your response to that?
Maria mentioned security blanket. Let's talk about what that is. It is something that makes someone feel safe and comfortable. A lot of times parents will give their babies a security blanket, to make them feel a little more safe. Ooh, I don't think I have ever taught this word, but swaddled. That baby is swaddled in a security blanket. It's another way to say like wrapped up really tightly. You might swaddle a newborn baby, but here's a sentence using a security blanket. For many voters, hearing their candidate speak is like a security blanket. Love this word, discombobulated. Discombobulated. I promise it's a real word. It means confused and upset. Harris looked discombobulated when Trump interrupted her. I bet sometimes when you are having an English conversation with another person, you could become discombobulated. Speaking English is really tough. I'm proud of you. You have been watching a long time. Keep up the good work. Maybe next time when you have that English conversation, you won't feel as discombobulated, accomplished. In the picture, you can see that person looks very happy, like they might have accomplished something. When you do something hard, you accomplish it. But the accomplish I want to talk about is just a little bit different. It's an adjective describing very skilled or successful. Both candidates are accomplished speakers. I would like to think, because I have been teaching for over 20 years, I'm an accomplished English teacher. In the interview, you heard whip smart. To be honest, I have never heard that term. We are going to talk about another term that I've never really heard before a little later. I've heard this more, smart as a whip. It's an idiom. It just means someone is really intelligent. And right there, I have a picture of a whip. Sometimes you might see a horse race, and the person riding the horse, we call them a jockey. They might whip the horse. It's never fun to look at. I'm sure it hurts the horse, but that's what a whip is when you might hear somebody say, oh, they are as smart as a whip. People say Harris is smart as a whip when it comes to debates. Last one before we watch another clip of that interview, but we have an English phrasal verb, thrives on. Thrives on. In the picture, I would say that there is a little plant, but it is thriving. It's growing. It's doing really well. Thrives on means enjoys or is successful in a particular situation. A soccer player might thrive on the crowd yelling, screaming, a lot of excitement in the crowd. Trump thrives on the excitement of a live debate. Makes him more awake. It gives him more energy. Let's do it. Another clip.
A couple of things. Number one, it's important to remember we had a Biden campaign and a Trump campaign, and for the first time in American history, we had a presidential campaign go blue screen of death, literally completely brick and melt down, and the party on a dime has said, we're going to anoint somebody new. It is absolutely
but
critical.
I'm asking specifically about the conditions.
I understand.
They're different. It's a different network that is much more Trump-friendly.
It's a different campaign. It's a completely different dynamic that, therefore, let's have a conversation about how to debate.
So
the American people deserve, frankly, to be introduced to her.
The man Alex keeps saying that nobody has voted for Harris. This can get a little complicated. Maybe I will do another English lesson on primaries, but this spring in the United States, we had primary elections. That is when Republicans go to vote on who they want to become president. Republicans voted for Donald Trump in the primaries, and Democrats voted for President Biden in the primaries. They did not actually vote for Vice President Harris. That's what Republicans are saying. Democrats are saying, well, she was part of the ticket. The ticket means like two people, Biden and Harris for the Democrats. And now for the Republicans, it is J.D. Vance and Trump. Former President Trump picked J.D. Vance as his running mate. I hope that makes sense. It can be pretty confusing. If you would like me to do an English lesson about the primary elections, let me know. The blue screen of death. It sounds very dramatic, right? Well, what is it? It's a computer error screen showing a major problem. That man sees two blue screens of death. Earlier in 2024, there was an update for a program, and a lot of computers showed that blue screen of death, and it really hurt travel in the United States. A lot of planes could not take off that day because of the blue screen of death. Do you remember that? Let's take a look at a sentence using blue screen of death. I don't think this would happen during a debate, but here's a sentence. Trump's computer had the blue screen of death right before the debate. You can imagine if that happened to former President Trump right before a debate, he would probably feel very discombobulated. Alex says a term I'd never heard of, so I'm not sure if he made a mistake. You know, when people are talking, they sometimes make mistakes. So I am going to assume that brick and meltdown was just a mistake he made. And I would like to teach you the term meltdown. Meltdown. That means a complete failure or collapse. If you look in the picture, that child is probably having a meltdown. A lot of screaming, a lot of crying when some kid melts down. You know that verb melt, right? Think of a chocolate bar and think of a really hot day. The chocolate will melt. Maybe if you put it in the refrigerator, it will stop it from melting. But here is a sentence using meltdown. The debate could turn into a meltdown if things get too heated. So this doesn't really mean a hot temperature. It means people might get angry with each other. And if the debate turns into a meltdown, it just means it would not be organized. The two candidates would probably be mad at each other, interrupting each other all of the time. Here's an idiom using the term dime. In the picture, I have a dime. It's worth 10 cents. It takes 10 dimes to equal $1. But the idiom to change on a dime, you might also hear turn on a dime, means to change very quickly and unexpectedly, like you didn't know this was going to happen. The mood or the feeling of the debate can change on a dime if one candidate says something surprising. That just means things are happening very fast if they change or turn on a dime. Anoint. It's a very formal way to say somebody has been officially chosen for a position. In the picture, the queen is anointing someone. They are making them a knight. The Republican Party has anointed former President Trump as their candidate for president. How about this sentence? The debate will show who might be anointed as the country's next president. Critical. It means super important, very important. It's critical that you drink enough water each day. You don't want to become dehydrated. The debate is very important. The debate is critical for both Harris and Trump's campaigns.
I know how those previous debates have been. I remember watching Tulsi Gabbard do her magic in the debate the last time that Vice President Harris ran.
Another politician was mentioned. Her name is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard debated Vice President Trump in the last election. Let's take a look at maybe Tulsi Gabbard destroying Vice President Trump. Did I just say Vice President Trump? Oh no, I'm getting as bad with names as President Biden.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. You can beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President, I'm better. You are a hell of a lot better.
Of course, Vice President Harris.
There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana.
Here's a sentence using Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard once debated Harris in a previous election. Previous, meaning like before. How was that? Did you learn a lot? If you still want to learn more, right down there is like 2.5 hours of English lessons with politics, American politics. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. If I said Matthew Perry did a lot of drugs, That's true, but it might sound a little harsh in English. So if you want to make it a little nicer, you can change drugs to substance abuse. Native English speakers will know what that means. You could say Matthew Perry has had substance abuse throughout his life.
Major break in the investigation of actor Matthew Perry's tragic death last October. Following months of investigation into how the Friend star obtained a fatal dose of drugs, search warrants were executed across Southern California.
All right, so let's get into the first one here. Major break. In the picture, you can see what looks like maybe two detectives trying to solve a crime. Major break. Finding something important that will help solve the case, a tip or a clue. For each of these terms, I will have an official definition, and I will also use that term in a sentence. So here is the sentence for major break. The police had a major break in the case when they found evidence linked to Matthew Perry's death. Evidence might be a new word for you, but that is proof. Those are things that can help you solve the crime. If somebody stole a car, some of the evidence might be finding their fingerprints on the steering wheel. Major break can also mean like some really good luck. Take a look at that picture. Looks like somebody is in the crowd, or are they singing? Let's make it a little bigger. Well, there's a microphone there, so it looks like she is singing. Here's a sentence I have for that. Her major break came when she met a very talented songwriter. But of course, break can mean like to make it not functional anymore, like you can't use it anymore. If this microphone broke, you would no longer be able to hear me. Take a look at that picture. It looks like a toy robot, but it is clearly broken. Yeah, break is an irregular verb. In the past tense, it becomes broke. Very sad here. The father broke his son's favorite toy when he stepped on it. And if you're anything like me as a dad, I would probably blame the child immediately if I stepped on his favorite toy. Like, why didn't you pick up this room? So mean. Lots of tears, I'm sure. Just a quick interruption. If you are liking this video, do you mind hitting that like button? And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Also, you might want to become a channel member. I have over 100 bonus English lessons there. Just last week, I released an English lesson about what does "don't drink the Kool-Aid" mean. All right, now back to the lesson. Investigation. It is a noun. Investigate is the verb. But what is an investigation? A careful search or study to find out the truth about something. So Matthew Perry's death is being investigated. There is an investigation into Matthew Perry's death. Here's a sentence. The police are conducting an investigation to learn more about what caused Matthew Perry's death. Tragic. Native English speakers love to use this word. What does it mean? Very sad. Usually because someone has died or something terrible has happened. It was tragic to hear about Matthew Perry's sudden death.
Major break in the investigation of actor Matthew Perry's tragic death last October. Following months of investigation into how the Friend star obtained a fatal dose of drugs, search warrants were executed across Southern California.
Obtained. It's a really fancy way to say got or receive. You now have something. To get something, especially after trying or searching for it. The police obtained new information about who might be involved in the death of Matthew Perry. Fatal. This is never a good word. It means someone or something has died. The official definition, causing death. The drug overdose turned out to be fatal for Matthew Perry. So an overdose of drugs means you have too many drugs inside your body. You don't always die if you overdose on drugs. If you can get medical attention soon, you could be saved. If you look at that picture, sad to say, but that might have been a fatal accident. Whoever was in that car may have died.
Following months of investigation into how the Friend star obtained a fatal dose of drugs, search warrants were executed across Southern California.
Let's talk about search warrants. The police cannot just go into anyone's house because they want to. They need to visit a judge to get something we call a search warrant. What is a search warrant? Legal documents that allow the police to search a person's property for evidence. Here's a sentence using search warrants. But hang on. We talked about investigation earlier. That's a noun. Investigate is a verb. Investigators are people who are investigating something. The investigators got search warrants to look for clues in the homes of those connected to Matthew Perry's death. I want to be very careful with this next one because there are two very different ways we use executed, but both have something to do with a crime. This first one, let me make the picture a little bigger. It's a SWAT team. That means police officers who have a lot more protection that they are wearing and probably bigger guns than normal police officers. But we can use executed when it comes to search warrants. Look right down there at the bottom. To carry out or put a plan into action. The police executed the search warrants early in the morning, hoping to find more evidence. So in this way, executed means to do something, to carry it out. English phrasal verb there, carry out. But this can be a little controversial to some people. In the United States, some states have something we call the death penalty. If you commit a crime that's so bad, some states will put you to death. And in that picture, we would call that an electric chair. So here's a definition using executed like somebody dying. It means to kill someone as a form of punishment in an organized way. I live in the state of Maine. We do not have the death penalty in my state, but Texas is a state that's very famous for its death penalty. Here's an example sentence. In some countries, criminals can be executed for serious crimes, like really, really bad crimes.
Search warrants were executed across Southern California. 5 suspects, including 2 doctors and a woman cops call the ketamine queen of Los Angeles, have been arrested.
The next one is ketamine. I'm sorry, in that picture, I did spell it wrong. Down below, that is the right spelling. It has an E instead of an A after the K. Before watching the news about Matthew Perry's death, I had never heard of ketamine. But if you're watching the news and you're seeing an investigation about Matthew Perry's death, you will probably hear ketamine. What is it? A strong drug that can be used as a medicine or abused for its effects. So doctors could prescribe ketamine and people would be just fine. But if you take too much ketamine, just like any drug, you can overdose on it. Here's a sentence. Ketamine was reportedly found in Matthew Perry's system at the time of his death. In English, we have systems of the body. So you have like a digestive system, which helps break down the food you eat. But when I hear Matthew Perry's system, I'm thinking mostly blood.
Major break in the investigation of actor Matthew Perry's tragic death last October. Following months of investigation into how the Friend star obtained a fatal dose of drugs, search warrants were executed across Southern California. 5 suspects, including 2 doctors and a woman cops call the ketamine queen of Los Angeles, have been arrested.
Stunning developments in the death of Matthew Perry. Law enforcement today announced the arrests of 2 doctors and 3 others in connection with the actor's fatal overdose. The arrests come 10 months after Perry drowned in his hot tub and followed dogged investigations by the DEA, U.S. Postal Service, and LAPD.
Stunning developments. If something is stunning, it can be quite surprising. The official definition below: shocking or surprising new information. There were stunning developments in the investigation when 5 people were arrested for their connection to Matthew Perry's death. Yes, almost 1 year after Matthew Perry died, the investigation showed that there could be some people who were responsible for his death. They probably won't be charged with murder, like they didn't actually kill him with a knife or a gun, but because they gave him drugs, they could be responsible for his death. We might call that manslaughter in English. Overdose, I've talked about this already, but let's get an official definition. Taking too much of a drug, which can be very dangerous or cause death. The doctors believe that Matthew Perry died from a drug overdose, and that drug is probably ketamine, Ketamine. Dogged. You might know what a dog is. This is something different. It's an adjective describing something. Being very determined and not giving up easily. The investigators were dogged in their search for answers about Matthew Perry's death. I hope you are dogged when it comes to learning English. You will never quit. You will keep learning for the rest of your life. Before we get to DEA, let me use dogged one more time in a sentence. Hopefully you have dogged determination to learn English. But what is the DEA? It's an acronym. So the D stands for a word, E stands for a word, and A stands for a word. What are those words? The Drug Enforcement Administration. It's very hard to say. So instead of saying all that, we will just say DEA. They are a government agency that fights drug crimes. The DEA. Here's a sentence using DEA. The DEA is involved in the investigation because drugs like ketamine were found in the case. Yeah, the case of Matthew Perry's death. Another acronym, LAPD. So the L stands for something, the A, let's talk about it. The Los Angeles Police Department. That's what LAPD stands for. They are responsible for keeping order in Los Angeles. The LAPD is leading the investigation into Matthew Perry's death.
Stunning developments in the death of Matthew Perry. Law enforcement today announced the arrests of 2 doctors and 3 others in connection with the actor's fatal overdose. The arrests come 10 months after Perry drowned in his hot tub and followed dogged investigations by the DEA, U.S. Postal Service, and LAPD.
The next news clip we will watch involves Megyn Kelly. I really like watching her because she doesn't talk like a news reporter. She will say some very common native English sayings, and I think it will be great to help you learn how to speak more like a native English speaker.
Bunch of people are being indicted today in connection with Matthew Perry's death from ketamine usage, an overdose.
A bunch of people. You can say a bunch of pretty much anything if there are a lot of something. Bunch of people. What does it mean? A casual way to say a large group of people. A bunch of people were talking about Matthew Perry's death on social media. This is a legal term, indicted. That's how you say that word, indicted. What does it mean? Officially charged with a serious crime. Officially charged with a serious crime. The 5 suspects were indicted after new evidence was found in Matthew Perry's death investigation. Ooh, lots of big words there. You might want to watch this English lesson twice. It's so complicated.
Bunch of people are being indicted today in connection with Matthew Perry's death from ketamine usage, an overdose. This is a drug that they're giving more and more. You're only supposed to do this, if at all, under controlled settings with a doctor, an MD who can monitor you.
Controlled settings. If Matthew Perry had taken that ketamine in a controlled setting, he might still be alive today. Let's talk about what controlled settings mean. Environments that are carefully managed and monitored. So if Matthew Perry was taking this drug in a controlled setting, that would mean he would go to the doctors regularly. He would go there often to make sure the ketamine wasn't doing damage to his body. It sounds like Matthew Perry was taking way too many doses of this ketamine. The drug ketamine is sometimes used in controlled settings by doctors to treat depression. And depression is when somebody is super, super sad for like many days or many months or even many years. Depression is a type of very serious sadness. So serious, you may have to take medications to make you feel better. I would like to teach you the term willy-nilly. Sounds fun, right? People should not take dangerous medicine willy-nilly. That's the opposite of a controlled setting. Willy-nilly pretty much means there are no rules. Just do whatever you want.
Matthew Perry's death from ketamine usage, an overdose. This is a drug that they're giving more and more. You're only supposed to do this, if at all, under controlled settings with a doctor, an MD who can monitor you. It is being used with some success to treat depression.
They use the term MD. It is an acronym. The M stands for medical and the D stands for doctor. A good MD should have prescribed ketamine to Matthew Perry. I've talked about this verb before, monitor. You might be watching me on a computer monitor, a screen. This is different. This is the verb. To carefully watch or check something. The police continue to monitor the suspects as part of their investigation into Matthew Perry's death. I talked about depression earlier. Let's get an official definition. A mental health condition that makes people feel very sad and hopeless for a long time. Hopeless. That means there is no hope. Matthew Perry was open about his struggle with depression and addiction. Yeah, it's crazy. Right before Matthew Perry died, like in October of last year, I read his autobiography. I found it very interesting because I did watch Friends growing up. I never knew how much Matthew Perry was addicted to drugs, even while filming the show.
An MD who can monitor you. It is being used with some success to treat depression. I know people who have tried this, so I don't mean to crap all over ketamine. But for people who are using it to find their way out of abuse of drugs already, it seems problematic.
All right, you got to love Megyn Kelly. She says crap all over. So what does that mean? To say bad things about somebody or something. Some people have crapped all over Matthew Perry's doctors for not monitoring him closely enough. Yeah, saying bad things about people. You might do it out loud, or you might do it like they are in the picture, probably spreading rumors. Problematic. It's a great adjective. And if you look at that picture, I'll make it bigger here. Looks like this car is being problematic. It looks like it has broken down on the side of the road. The woman is on a cell phone and she has the hood up. Maybe she's looking at the engine under there. Problematic. It has problem in it, right? Causing problems or being difficult to deal with. Her car had become problematic. It would break down on her often. Here's another way to use problematic when it's not related to Matthew Perry's death. Their marriage had become problematic. They agreed to get a divorce. That is going to do it. Hopefully you know a little more about Matthew Perry. His death was definitely tragic. If you would like me to talk more about this in English lessons, leave a comment. Say, I want more Matthew Perry, and I will do that. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.